What's up everyone, welcome to Drummer's Perspective. My name is Ben Todd and I'm here to help broaden your scope of what's possible as a drummer. Thank you so much for checking out the video today, whether you're watching here on YouTube or you're listening on the podcast. I really do appreciate you wherever you're coming in from. If you are watching here on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel. That definitely does help me out. Now today, I'm really excited to bring you a conversation I had with the amazing Emma Ford. Now, Emma was born in Australia, studied drums in Australia, and was an active member of the Australian musical theatre scene, but is now living, working, and performing on a full-time Broadway gig, the amazing show Shucked. Now, in this chat, I speak with her about her amazing journey of starting out in the Australian musical theatre scene and what that transition was like to move to New York and become established in the scene there. What some of the similarities and differences are between the Australian scene and the Broadway scene, as well as what some of the realities are of being a Broadway musician and living and working in New York. There's so much really incredible, super useful and inspiring advice that Emma shared, and I know I got a lot out of it, and I think there's a lot of people out there who will get something out of this too. Thank you again for checking out the video. Sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with Emma Ford. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to offer you a free gift, and today that's my 7 ways to attract more work as a drummer PDF guide. If you feel like you're working on all the right stuff, you're seeing improvement in your playing, perhaps you're actually quite established in your local music scene, but still you're not working just as much as you would like to, then this guide is perfect for you. Here I offer you 7 ways to reapproach your development and your progression as a drummer and offer you a fresh perspective on some things you might be able to change in your development to hopefully bring in a little bit more work. The best thing about this guide is that only one of the tactics involves picking up a pair of drumsticks at all. So if you're feeling a little stuck, frustrated, and tired of not being able to be out there working and playing more, then please head to drummersperspective.com/7ways and grab that free downloadable PDF guide right now. Emma Ford, thank you so much for taking some time today to chat with me on the Drummer's Perspective podcast. I've been really looking forward to connecting with you in some way for a long time, so I'm super excited this is happening.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I feel like I've followed your journey for so long, and it's wild to actually get to sit down and have a chat with you.
Oh,
it's
cool.
awesome.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, like, we've never met in person, but we have a lot of mutual friends, I think, from the scene back home. But yeah, like, since becoming connected with you on social media, it's been super inspiring, I think, to see your journey and progression in the theatre world and what you're doing now and the level that you're at is like, yeah, you're inspiring a lot of people out there and myself included. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. It's really cool.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, I mean, you've achieved something that I think not only a lot of Australian drummers, aim for, Australian musicians, but like musicians all over the world, and that's to actually be playing on a Broadway gig, which you're doing at the moment. And I think maybe for Australian musicians specifically, at least from my point of view, maybe like Broadway can seem like just an untouchable kind of world away, So like, I'm curious, like, how did that journey unfold for you from being born in Australia and studying jazz at the Con and to having the gig that you have now? Like, was it always a dream to live in New York, or is it something that's just kind of became obvious at some point in your development?
Yeah, I think Broadway kind of was always like the goal at the back of my mind. I think I was very drawn to all like the opportunity that was here in New York and the amount of shows that were going on, because we don't have that in Australia. Like, it's a very small theatre scene down there, and I kind of always knew that I wanted to at least try Broadway, but it did seem like a far away goal to me. So yeah, I did music all through high school, and then I went to the Con, and came out of the Con and kind of just tried to get my foot in the door in the Sydney scene. But it was it was difficult because there are only mainly two theaters, and if you're not on either of those gigs, then you're not going to work in a show for a year. The drummers usually tended to be the same sort of people each time. As a woman, it felt at the time very difficult to break into that scene. And I just wasn't getting the opportunities that I was seeking. So I basically was just like, well, maybe Broadway can be a thing sooner than I ever expected. And so I think I first of all went to check out New York. I just traveled through here. I did like a little trip around America and Canada. And while I was here, I met up with the drummer for Hamilton, Andres Ferrero, and he gave me some lessons. And I said, this is something I would love to do. Do you think I can do it? And he said, yes, absolutely. You just have to move here. And I was like, okay, well, okay.
Yeah.
If this guy thinks that I can do it, he's on the biggest show on Broadway right now. Like, if he thinks I can crack the scene here, then I think I think I should take that seriously.
Oh my gosh, what an incredible encouragement and like endorsement to have someone like you say who's like living and breathing that. And like legitimately hearing you play and seeing you play and be like, yeah, no, you could do it. That must have been a real like kick into gear, I would imagine.
Oh, it sure was. It sure was. From then, I went back home. I ended up winning this Theatre Musicians Award grant that allowed me to put some money towards anything to do with my career. So I decided to come back to New York in 2017 and study with him for 3 months. And then after that, I had time to check it out. I looked at a lot of different neighborhoods to potentially live in, got to know the area, saw a bunch of Broadway shows, met a bunch of Broadway drummers, asked them for their advice on things. And then that was enough for me to be like, yes, I want to move here. So went back home after those 3 months and started my visa process and came back the following year, and somehow here I am, and I don't want to leave.
You're living it, yeah. How amazing though. Like I said, like so inspiring to see yourself like living a dream that I think a lot of people have, like legitimately. And I think for many people, not just drummers, but it can just seem so overwhelming to think about that whole process alone, of moving to another country, let alone like actually becoming successful in the scene. That's like two totally different things, but for you to be able to kind of do them concurrently, that's a huge credit to your drive and obviously your talent and all of that stuff like kind of goes hand in hand. But yeah, it's so awesome. I'm kind of curious then, now that you have worked like on Broadway, but also in the professional theatre scene in Australia, was there anything like surprising like from like the differences between the two scenes, and maybe like how other musicians approach the gig or the job, or like the conditions and like that kind of, like what's expected of you? Like, is there anything kind of different in that sense?
Yeah, I think without trying to offend the scene that I grew up in and that I knew, it is very different, and it does feel like high level, like people come from all over the world to play on Broadway. That's people's goals as a musician. So you find that like anyone that has a Broadway gig is like mostly very happy to be there and like stoked to be doing the work and like determined to do their best and love being there, as opposed to it just being kind of like a money motivated situation. And I felt as soon as I got here, like, I mean, there's still a long way to go, but the diversity in each of these pits was really inspiring. There were a lot more women, a lot more people of color, a lot more like different sexual orientation. It was really nice to feel like I had a place here. Well, I didn't necessarily feel that back home, which is a shame. I know it's changed now since I've been gone for the last 5 years. I know it's doing a lot better, at least in Sydney, which I'm really glad to hear. But when I first arrived here, I was like pleasantly surprised at how great the pits just looked. It felt like a real community of people, and and I think like the other thing that I felt was it was so because it's Broadway, you know, it's a big deal, and everyone takes it very seriously. So I did feel that the stakes were a lot higher over here, which I like, because I like a challenge, and I like, you know, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so it's always like I'm trying to do my absolute best every show, instead of, you know, sometimes if you get tired or whatever, you're not feeling well, it's easy to kind of just, you know, play it 50-60%. But when you're on Broadway, I feel like, every show has to be good, because the people out in the audience, this is their probably first and only time they will see this show. So you have to give your best every show for each of those people out there. So I definitely feel motivated and driven by the prestige of Broadway and everything, everyone that works on the shows, and the level of love and passion and the hours of work and everyone else's skills just make you want to like do a better job. So that's inspiring. I definitely felt that shift when I arrived.
That's amazing. I mean, I guess like maybe in the you know, the change in like the younger musicians kind of coming in more into Broadway now, it must be really cool as well. You know, like as you mentioned before, I think in Australia, like in particular, that's kind of all I can relate it to. But like, there are like just a certain kind of group of people that get to do the shows, and they've been doing them all for a very long time, and you know, they're great at it. But I was having a chat with a friend of mine who's living in New York at the moment too, who moved there to study jazz, and he's been there for a while now. But he was saying, like, you know, he's meeting new people every week that he's playing with, which is, you know, it's a pretty crazy concept to think about, like coming from Australia, where once you get to a certain level, you get to know pretty much everyone who's in the scene, and then to go to a place like New York and still be like there for 5, 6, 7 years and still be meeting new people who are all awesome. Like, it's not like, I just play a little bit. Like, they're all like killer players. That must be like, I mean, do you feel that level of competition as well, in the sense like there's a lot of people who would want to do what you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, it is wild. Like, the scene is so, it feels big, and it is big, I guess, in comparison to Australia. I think there's something like 270 musicians on Broadway right now, like shareholders.
Wow.
So that's great. That means there's a lot of musicians employed, but that means there's, you know, how many drummers does that mean? Probably not many, maybe, I don't know, 15. 15 to 20, I'd say.
Wow.
So the thing that I love here is that, like, well, I'm still meeting people. I have no idea, like, how big this scene is because of subbing is a huge deal here, and like, so filling in for the main shareholder is in itself can be a full-time gig. So essentially a sub could play more shows in a week than a shareholder does. Sure. Depending on whatever night their night off is, the sub will still be working on someone's night off and therefore doing more shows. And usually every chair will have 3 to 5 subs. So that's so many more, like 270 people with 3 to 5 subs each. That's a huge amount of musicians working on Broadway, which is so cool. And I love that we get so many opportunities. That's how I started here and worked my way up to having a chair. But that also helped me meet a lot of people, because you're in different shows every night. And they all have their chairholders, but they have their subs. So you're never doing the show with the same people every time you come into that theater, which is very cool. And like you said, your friends meeting new people every week. And when I was subbing, felt the exact same. It just felt like the scene was so big. And that was also really exciting. Like you said, coming from somewhere where the scene's so small, we all know each other.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so fun to play with new people and meet new people and get to know them, and just feels like it's ever expanding. But for me, I haven't felt too much of like the competition aspect of it. I think because I'm so driven in what I want for myself, I kind of just like, I have the blinkers on and I'm just going straight for it. And I'm not.
Right.
It feels like because there are so many opportunities that like everyone's going to get a go at it anyway. So, I can be like, oh, dang, this person got that sub gig and I missed out. But it's okay because there's so many other shows, and maybe someone will want to use me over here or over here. And I just know that I feel like so driven by what I want that I can make that happen for myself somehow. And it also comes from recommendations from other musicians and people that talk you up, and that's very helpful and wonderful too. And I'm grateful people have done that for me as well. But it just feels like there's kind of space for everyone here, which is really nice.
It makes a lot of sense, but it also is really, it kind of goes against what you would think Broadway would be, in a sense of, like, it sounds like it's harder to get, not harder, there are less opportunities obviously in Australia. Like if you want to, be a theatre musician, like there's minimal shows, minimal spots, and if you don't get those spots, then as you were saying earlier, like you just don't get into the scene. But if you move to Broadway, which you think is like, it's the best of the best in that kind of sense, but there's more opportunity. So you might have more chance of actually getting in on that level, which is so great. It's so great. And like that it still exists as well is really cool after everything that's kind of happened the last few years. So I kind of want to change track a little bit and like for more of a playing sense, like, you know, drummers who want to play in theatre, there are certain things that are expected, you know, solid time, being versatile, being able to follow a conductor. I guess these days more and more being able to play to a click. Is there anything that you have experienced in the last, you know, few years of doing what you do that you think is really important for drummers to have under their belt?
Yeah, I mean, reading skills is like super necessary, because just being in New York in general, you can be called for any kind of gig, anything like theater related or not. Usually, there's going to be charts, and you have to be able to basically sight read on the spot. I've been in a few situations where I've just been called last minute and just had to show up and sit down and play the thing, and it's been terrifying, but I'm glad I did all my years of learning how to read music and you know, keep consistently practicing that and improving that. I think that's a big one. Definitely playing with a conductor is super helpful if you can find opportunities to do that, whether being in like a community band or orchestra or a band, local band, or at your university or school, whatever. Highly recommend, because there are for some reason a lot of different styles of conducting, and everyone conducts a little bit different, and especially if you're coming in as a sub, you're not used to each conductor's style, and then each conductor also has subs, so you'll be playing with their subs and they all conduct differently. So if you can learn to follow as many different people, get used to following different styles of conductors, that will definitely benefit you, I think, because sometimes it can be a bit scary when you got people that you're not used to following, and there's so many other things to concentrate on in the moment. So if there's a conductor that's not particularly clear or does a different movement for whatever, then like that's always a challenge. I think that's something to think about as well. And
so how does that work on a like, say you're going into a gig that you've played before, but then you've got a subconductor coming in that you haven't worked with before? Do you have any kind of conversation with them before the show starts? Do you kind of have an idea of how they might conduct, or is it literally like downbeat, like, oh, okay, that's how you're going to conduct? Sure.
It's pretty much that.
Yeah.
It's pretty much just thrown into it, unless there's any like specifically like a tricky cue that you're a little bit nervous about, that you need some guidance, you need to learn how they're going to cue it. Unless you have that, it's pretty much just like sit down and good luck.
Great. Wow, how cool. I guess like tying on from that, you've done some like incredible shows already. What have been like some of the more challenging shows that you've been a part of, and why?
Well, this one was actually in Australia. I did In the Heights, which is a Lin-Manuel Miranda show, one of his first ones. And it's so hectic because it's like heavy Latin grooves, and like mixed with hip hop, which is like, I love the music, but all the Latin stuff was like technically very difficult. And luckily I had learnt that show while I was in New York with Andres Ferrero. He was the original drummer on the show on Broadway. and he wrote the whole drum book, and he's like Colombian, so he taught me all of these Latin rhythms, and they're super complex but super fun. But that is one of the more challenging shows that I've played. And the other one, which I didn't expect to be challenging, was Moulin Rouge, which I subbed on here on Broadway. And it like you think it's a lot of like pop songs, rock songs. But there's so much going on all the time, and it's pretty non-stop for the drums. And Jared Schoenig, who is the drummer over there, and he created the book, he's a beast of a player, and he hits hard. So it's like trying to match his level of intensity and energy and all of the choppy stuff that he does in the show, and like he's a beast. He's so great. But it is really hard to try and replicate his playing. He's like a big, tall man, and I am a very small woman. So it's hard to like try and be him. But it was also one of the most fun books that I've ever played.
Wow.
He's just written some groovy parts, and it's just like a lot of backbeat stuff, which I love. So yeah, I found that one challenging, but I also really loved it.
Challenging and rewarding.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Yeah, when you make it to the end of the show, you're like, oh God, I'm so relieved. Thank God.
How great. So when you have been approached, well, in the early days when you were approached to sub on shows, and I guess even now, how do you practice for them? I mean, I know like living in New York can be very challenging to have a practice space and somewhere to play. And in terms of like actually, needing to adjust to the setups of these people that you're subbing for, how does that process work for you? Do you just find us a studio, like a rehearsal studio to work on stuff, and then do you get time on the setup at all?
Yeah, so usually my process with learning a show is I will get the music, and usually when you get the music, you get like conductor recordings and recordings of the show, and I will sit with it depending on how long I have to learn it, which often I don't really have that long. Usually it's about 1 to 2 weeks. And so I'll try and sit with it for as long as possible and memorize it. And not like so that I have to be off book, but just so I know visually. I think I'm a visual learner, so I need to see it to like get it into my brain. And I'll listen to the songs over and over and over and over and over again so that I know what to expect and know what's going to come up. Like say like, oh, I know that I play hats for this bit, but then I'm going to, in a second, switch to ride, and then I'm going to put my sticks down, and then I'm going to grab this tambourine, and then I'm going to do this. Like I can know what is coming up so that when I finally get to play it on a kit, I automatically just can go to those things. I can do well enough to put it on a kit. So then the next step is usually, because in New York you can't play drums in your apartment. Some people share studio space, but for the last little bit, I haven't really been in a position to share that with someone. So usually I will just hire a practice room at a studio for a couple hours at a time and just work through it. And then I've also been lucky enough that most of the shows that I've subbed at have let me practice on the kit in the theatre at certain times. So that is super helpful because it's so hard to replicate that person's setup, like the heights of the cymbals and the heights of the drums and the positioning of the drums and all the extra percussion. That's hard to replicate even if you had your own studio, let alone in a practice room.
Mm.
They have like nothing in there. So
Sure.
I'm so glad that I've been able to go in and spend time on those kits before I actually get to play on them. And I think that's a common thing now that the drummers are allowed to go in and play on the kits. It also depends. If the drums are on stage, they have more rules about whether you can or not. But if they're in the basement or in a pit or in another room, usually people are pretty cool with you just going in during the day when no one's there and playing. So I've been pretty lucky with that.
Amazing. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to be able to, at least get some time on the drums and the setup specifically. Because I've seen some pictures of your setup on Hamilton and I think in the Heights as well, and the show you're currently on. And it's not just your standard setup at all. There's a whole bunch of extra stuff going on that you have to kind of figure out the whole choreography side of the book as well. So the show that you're currently on, that's your gig, right? Like you're the main shareholder. Amazing. So on a practical level, do you know like how long the show is going to run for, or like, because in Australia, as you know, it's like the season's pretty set, so like, okay, I've got 3 months here and then I look for something else. But in a position that you're in now, the incredible spot to have a full-time gig. Like, do you think about what might be next, or are you just like, this is my gig for now, and if something happens, I'll think about that later?
Yeah, I mean, this is the struggle of being on Broadway is because a lot of runs of shows are open-ended. So it is just up to the audiences for how long the show runs, and like if the producers can afford to keep putting the show on every week. So we've seen a lot since COVID. A lot of shows are not running very long because we haven't got the audience back like it was before COVID. There's just less tourists, less people coming to see Broadway shows, and people, struggle to afford a ticket to a Broadway show, especially after those rough 2 years. So we're just not seeing the numbers that we used to. So some shows are doing like a limited run of like a 3 month or a 6 months, similar to what you'd get in Australia. But my show that I'm on right now, Shucked, is an open-ended run. So that is great, and I am hopeful that it will run for a little while. We're hoping at least a year at this point. Like, it opened in April, so if we can make it to a year, that would be an achievement, because a lot of shows, like I said, just have been closing so quickly, and Broadway seems pretty fragile at the moment still. And I think it might take a while, like a couple more years, for it to settle and return to where it was before. So everyone that gets on a show is always like, trust, like we hope that the people want to come and see our show and hope that we stay open for a while. So because of that, like I'm not thinking about the future and what's next. I'm kind of just hoping that our show will run, and you never know, it could close next week or it could run for years. So I don't want to think about like planning my next step. But I do feel pretty safe that I can fall back into subbing if my show closes, and I've got a lot of friends and connections that I feel would help me out if I needed a job
Mhm.
again. So
Mm.
right now I'm just hoping our
Yeah.
show continues to do well, and we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and enjoying it as well, because like you say, it's already an achievement for it to get like. I mean, it's a huge achievement for a show to get to Broadway, right? Like from all the development and
Mm.
people like producers like sponsoring to put it on and all that stuff. Like just for it to get there is incredible. So the fact that it's still running is great. But no, that's really cool. I was wondering if you did any other gigs outside of the show. Like, are you working on other music or other projects, or is it kind of just sort of taking up that taking up all the time at the moment?
Usually, I try to do other gigs outside of the show, just
Mm,
to do other fun things and stay in
mm,
touch with people and play other music, which is
mm,
always fun. When you're doing 8 shows a week of the same
mm,
music, you're like start to get a little bit like,
mm-hmm.
get out, I need to do
Yeah, yeah.
something different. Um, but usually, whatever gigs I'm doing is still kind of in the theatre
Mm,
world or with
sure.
theatre people. So I did last week, I think it was. I did a gig with Lin Manuel Miranda and Javier Munoz and Manny Gonzalez, who were both in the original In the Heights and Hamilton.
Wow.
Um, and I've been playing with them a lot, which has been great. Doing a bunch of little cabaret
Mm-hmm.
one-off concerts with some singers that I love, and galas, and just kind of anything and
Mm,
anything at this
mm,
point. The other thing that is great about New York is that there are always workshops and readings of new shows
mm,
that are trying to
mm,
eventually make it to Broadway. I mean, these things take years. Our
mm.
show, Shucked, took something like 10 years to get to Broadway,
Wow.
just through writing and rewriting and it,
Mm,
trying to work your way there, get the money. Like it's a process.
mm-hmm.
Um, so there are always like hundreds of readings going on all across the city all the
Mm,
time. Um, and usually those are like it can be a week to 5 week long stints where you're just workshopping, creating music, working with composers, choreographers, um, basically putting the music together, and the dancing and the staging and everything comes together in that room. Um, and that's always really exciting. And I love being part of those. So usually I'll do that all day and then go
mm,
to the show at night, which is
mm.
exhausting, but
Yeah, yeah.
it is fun to see, all of the new work that's going to eventually, hopefully, make it to
Yeah,
Broadway at some point in the
sure.
future. And it's great to play with new people and work with new people. And yeah, I love doing that stuff.
Mm,
There's always things happening here,
mm,
so
mm.
I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, yeah. So were you a part of the pre-production work on Shucks? Like, were you influencing the parts as a little bit? No.
No, so I joined the show just after it had opened, so that had already
Mm,
been established, um, and the show was like
preset.
into its run.
Mm,
So I just joined in like a month after it
mm-hmm,
had already started shows. So by then the book had already been created, and
mm-hmm,
I was just jumping on board.
mm,
Um, but I do really want to get to a place where I'm working on a show from the very beginning. I
mm,
think I'd love to write my own book. I'd
mm,
love to be able to create parts and work with the music team and
mm,
um, that is something that's like next on my to-do list. It's hard to get in at ground level, but if you get lucky on a good show that's, you know, going to come to Broadway, then like that's the best place to be in. So that I think is my next dream for Broadway is creating my own book from the very beginning.
Yeah. I mean, but having the experience you have now of like playing a bunch of shows and knowing what it's like to play the same, you know, music 8 times a week, like you have a whole new perspective on approaching that, I think. But it kind of leads me to something I wanted to ask you about. And I did a video last week talking about some of the ideas I have about playing the same music every day. You know, like how to keep it fresh and interesting and challenging and how to stay motivated with that. But I'm really curious to hear your thoughts. What's your take on, you know, rolling up to the show to play it for the, you know, 7th, 8th time, and what are the things that you look for to keep it interesting and challenging for yourself?
I think the good thing about Broadway and theatre is that you don't play the same show twice, even though it's the same show. There's always like, it's very rare to have the full band there and the full cast. So every show's gonna be different. If there's a sub in the band, things are gonna be different. Like it's gonna sound different, it's gonna feel different. Not in a bad way at all. It's someone's different interpretation of it than you're used to, and maybe like a little bit different timing. If there's different conductors, the show is going to change. If there's covers on for the cast, the same thing. The timing of the lines are going to be different. It's not the same every show, which I think is exciting, because it's like, it really does feel like live theater. Anything could happen. You're always like on edge, looking out for, you know, are we coming out of this vamp early, or are we sitting here for a while, like longer than we normally would? And when is this cue going to come? And it's, for me, I always am excited when that happens, because it does feel like a different show when you've got a bunch of other people on in their different roles or different musicians. That keeps it exciting for me. And also just me being a perfectionist, like knowing that, oh, maybe I didn't nail this fill last night, but I'm going to try and like get it spot on this time. And then just trying to avoid mistakes, which is hard because we're human and it's going to happen. But trying to keep on my toes the whole time and stay focused just on the show, and, you know, not thinking about like, oh, what am I going to have for dinner? Or, oh, I have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, or something, like not letting your brain wander off. Because for me anyway, that's when my mistakes happen, when I kind of sometimes go into autopilot and then start thinking about other things. That's never good.
Yeah, sure.
So I just try my best to like try to put everything else out of my head and focus exactly on what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing, and trying to do the best job possible. And if all else fails, then I just get into the sugar. I'll have Coke, I'll have chocolate. Sometimes I'll have like energy drinks. Anything to keep me focused and awake and like aware.
Yeah, totally. I get it. I mean, yeah, like the gig I'm on at the moment, like you pretty much have all day to do whatever you want, and then you come to the show and you do the show, which is great. But sometimes like I find, well, I found myself like, okay, I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to go to this, museum. I'm going to go get lunch here. I'm going to go check out this. And then by the time you actually get to the show, like you're exhausted from just
Yeah.
doing other stuff, like life
Yeah.
stuff. And then you got to actually like perform. It's, yeah, it can be a
Right.
tricky balance to find that stuff sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. Wait, how many shows do you do a week?
At the moment, it's 10. Yeah, in Japan, it's
Whoa.
10. Yeah, so yeah, it's a lot, and strangely enough, in Japan, it's the daytime shows. So they're like 11:30 and 3:30. So we're kind of done by 6:30, and then, but sound checks at 9:30, 10 every morning. So yeah,
Cool.
it's a weird schedule, but usually like yeah, when we're in the States or Canada or Australia, it's always like evening shows. But yeah, it can be a real hard thing to balance because for me, like yeah, I kind of get motivated and my mindset can change with the approach to the show just by doing other stuff. But
Mhm.
sometimes if you do too much other stuff, yeah, you just burn out and then you can't give your best to the show. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting thing to try and
Yes.
figure out. Yeah.
I agree. I think rest is so important, and I find that a lot of people in the Broadway world and people that I'm sure like you and all the performers that you work with, like they feel like you gotta like you gotta keep going, like always hustling, always doing
Mm,
something. Especially if you're traveling as well, you
mm,
gotta go and like sightsee and
mm-hmm,
you fill your time. But even just like getting groceries or
mm,
socializing,
mm-hmm,
I feel like rest is should be at the top of
mm,
the list. I mean, all those other things are important. Yes, you
mm,
should do them, but I find like on the one day off that we have on Monday is just like I'm like lock myself in my apartment. I'm
yeah,
like, no one
yeah,
talk to me. I'm not doing
yeah,
anything today
yeah,
because I know that if I do and I fill my time with other things, then getting through the next 8 shows is
mm,
going to be a struggle,
hard work,
um,
yeah,
mentally and physically.
mm,
If I know that if I don't rest,
mm-hmm,
I really suffer, and like it's hard to get through each day. Even though we have our days free, but those are the times I'm filling with other stuff, like
mm-hmm,
with the
mm,
groceries, with the workshops and rehearsals and other things. So
mm, mm,
I find that a lot of people here do tend to burn out very quickly because they try to do a lot of stuff when
mm,
they should be resting, I
mm-hmm,
guess. Um,
mm,
that also has to do with how expensive it is to live in New York.
mm,
So I
mm,
think people have to work a lot, but
mm,
I try to at least keep my Mondays completely free. Otherwise, I'll just be a zombie for the rest of
mm,
the week. I won't be,
mm.
I won't be able to do my best.
Yeah, sure. But that's such great advice, like for a lot of musicians to hear, like from someone like yourself who, I think you come through school, we come through university, you go hustling for gigs, and it's just, yeah, like push, 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 push to try and get to a certain level or a certain place or a certain gig. And then when you actually get there, it's amazing. But yeah, you kind of sometimes have to like, it takes a while to unwind that mental state of needing to, yeah, like you say, continue to push and look for things to occupy your time, especially if you've just been doing that for years to get to that point. So, yeah, because then when you do get to that point, it's probably for a really good gig that needs your 100% energy and focus. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's huge, huge. So hypothetically, a drummer moves to New York. They want to get into the Broadway scene. Don't know anyone. Haven't made any connections already. What's your advice for that kind of thing? Is it just trying to meet people? Is it trying to shadow? Is it trying to sub? And how much influence now do you think like social media has with connecting people on Broadway in that world?
Yeah, I mean, social media is huge now, and it's getting people gigs without like you actually knowing the person. If people are posting their videos of them playing, people can be hired just solely through that, just solely seeing people play and being, oh, yeah, they look good. Let's use them. So that's wild that can happen. So I'm terrible at that. I need to post more videos, but I suck at doing that. But it does work for a lot of people. So if that feels like that's something right for you and you want to explore posting your content on social media and Instagram, YouTube, whatever, then I think it's definitely beneficial. It is an advantage because if you are recommended to someone, people want to know that you can play. So they will go looking for your videos. They will go looking to hear what you sound like and whether you meet a certain standard, I guess. Well, at least what I did when I first moved to the city, there's a website that's called BroadwayMusicians.com, and it lists every current show on Broadway and all of the musicians on it. Each show, each chair holder, it will list. So what I did when I first arrived is I went onto that website. I found every drummer on all of the shows that were on at the time. I found their contact information and I just emailed all of them. And I said, hello, I'm new to the city. I love theater. I love Broadway. This is what I want to do. Do you mind if we meet up for a coffee so that I can like ask you some questions? And a lot of people replied and said yes, and we met up and it was great. Some people didn't reply. Some people took ages to reply, but the ones that said yes and took the time to meet up with me, it was so genuine, and they really like had a lot of wisdom to share with me and advice to give me, and just making that connection, meeting that person has proven to be valuable to me as I went along. I wasn't ever asking for a job. I wasn't ever expecting a job.
Right.
I just wanted the knowledge that I needed to get to where I wanted to be. So I would ask them, like, what kind of stuff do you practice? Where do you practice? What music influenced you? What drummers influenced you? Like, do you have any recommendation on how to break into this scene, and who should I know and who should I talk to? Like, anything I could get from them was helpful information, because again, I knew nothing and no one. So I was just like, tell me everything that I can make the best decisions for myself and give myself the best chance to break in whenever it was going to be my time. So I think through, like, even though, you know, you obviously have to be talented and have skills to a specific level, I think for me what is more important is your personality and who you are as a human and your personal relationships with people. Those are the things that are going to get you somewhere, because everyone here that's in town that's trying to be on Broadway, that is on Broadway, are phenomenal drummers. We're all good. Like, everyone's talented. But what gets you the gig usually is how you behave in a workplace. How, like, are you a humble person? Are you there to learn? Are you there to be better? Are you kind to everyone you work with? Are you fun to be around? Are you professional? All of that stuff, I think, matters way more than your drumming skills. And I think people now are getting hired based on that.
Mm.
Because no one wants to work with a not nice person.
Sure. Yeah.
So I think that is definitely being considered way more now than it was in the past.
Right.
So I think that is an important skill to have, because I've come across, a lot of young drummers as well will message me and ask me similar things and ask me to go and meet up with them. I'll come across people will message me on social media and things, and it's just interesting to see the different personalities and people that I can recognize will do well just because of who they are rather than how they play. And, having an ego is not a nice thing, and people don't really want to be around that. And I've come across a couple of people that have that and aren't doing super well. And it's just showing me that it really does matter, to be a kind person is super important. Someone you want to be around that has good people skills and engages with you and enjoys talking with you during intermission and just little things. They really do matter to people, and being able to take notes from the conductor and not take it personally or not fight back or not complain. All of those things are so valuable as a professional musician, and I think it's starting to go the way of people hiring bands based on the people, because again, everyone here is talented. You're gonna get great musicians no matter what, but they're bringing groups of people together that are good people, that will get along, that will enjoy being together, diverse groups of people, supportive humans. Like that is the most important thing, I think.
That's huge. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you spend so much time with the people that you work with. So, yeah, and I'm sure you've experienced too, just one or two people in that small group who are not such a good hang. Like, it can be poisonous. Like, that vibe really, seeps through everyone and everything. And yeah, ultimately affects how you play, how you're thinking about the gig. So, yeah, of course. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, you this has all been so awesome, but you mentioned that you got to spend time with a lot of the guys and girls that were playing on Broadway. What's some of the best advice that you were given, when you were trying to establish yourself in the scene?
I mean, it's similar to what I was just talking about. One drummer that has been super helpful to me and has become a mentor of mine and has always been so supportive of me is a guy called Larry Lely, and he's been on Broadway for many, many, many years. And he's a great drummer, and I subbed for him on Come From Away. He became someone that I could go to with any question that I had regarding drums or theater or anything in life. I would go to him. He was just so wise. He just knows everything. So I would just go to him, and I still do. I call him all the time. I'm like, Larry, help me. I don't know what my tax form is. What is it? Yeah, he's great. And I would always go to him and be down on myself and insecure and oh, I don't know if I played super well. I don't know if I'm as good as this person, and comparing myself and whatever. And times when I haven't had work, he's always just been so sure, like he's just been very supportive of me as a professional and a musician, that he just says, you know, be yourself and your opportunities will come. And he's like, I have no doubt. You just be yourself, do what Emma Ford does, because no one else can do what Emma Ford does. And I was just like, ooh.
Yeah, that's
like,
awesome.
That is wild to me. And you know, I may not be the best drummer on Broadway, but like no one else can do what I can do. And that's an asset to me. And that is inspirational in that, you know, I have something special, and you know, that will get me where I want to be, and it has so far. And in those periods of no work, I start to panic and go, am I going to have to move back to Australia? But then, you know, things like that make me think, well, no, people have wanted to work with me before, and I feel confident in my abilities, and I know that the next thing will come. And I also know that I'm driven enough to make that happen for myself. You know, I don't kind of wait around. I'm still proactive with myself work, but I trust that being me is enough to get me there, you know, which is a big thing coming from someone who, I guess, I mean, we all do struggle with self-esteem and, you know, low confidence issues about ourselves and our playing. And to have someone who is like a big deal in the industry just say, you're going to be fine. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're going to be okay. Like, that means a lot to me.
100%.
And that goes for every single person. Like, no one can be Ben Todd. Like, Ben is amazing. There's no one that can do what you can do. And like, everyone has that. So
absolutely,
that is something that I hold on to a lot when I'm feeling a little bit down. That kind of personally is the best advice, because a lot of it, you know, mental.
Oh yeah, for sure, 100%. That's super powerful, like, and so true. And I think you know, it goes hand in hand with like what people are seeing you do on a career level, and knowing that that's the place you're coming from with it mentally is, I mean, it's super inspiring just to hear and to see. So yeah, I think that's an awesome place to finish up, because it's great. It's super, it's amazing. And I think you're inspiring a whole new generation of girls and guys out there to follow their dream and their passion of doing what you're doing. And so yeah, keep going, because it's great. I really look forward to seeing where you go from here. And I guess where can people find you and follow you online if they want to keep up with what you're doing?
I mean, I have a website, emmaforddrums.com. I try to keep that updated. Sometimes I forget it exists, but I try to keep it updated as much as I can. And then Instagram is probably where I'm most active. I also I'm not there too often, but
Sure.
They can find me at emmaford.drums on Instagram. And
Great.
usually it's a lot of Broadway and drum content, and then sometimes just like my life things, like traveling and stuff. But yeah, that's probably the best place to find me.
That's great. Cool. Well, thank you so much again. There's been some amazing insight and information there for a lot of musicians and drummers out there. So I really, really appreciate your time, Emma. I know it's a busy schedule for you, and getting up early to do this is it means a lot. So yeah, I hope we can meet in person one day.
I hope so too. I hope so too. Come to the States. Bring your show
I'd
to
love
the
that.
States.
I would love that.
Me too.
Okay, well, thank you so much again, and we'll speak soon.
All right, thanks, Ben.
Thank you.